Yes, 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 yes. Welcome, welcome, Jocelyn Resnick in the house. Claire Wasserman here, and all of you. Just a little intro of myself, Jocelyn, and then we will get right into the conversation. I'm Claire Wasserman, founder and author of Ladies Get Paid. We are an educational platform, global community, and book all about helping women earn more and live better. And I've been hosting these lives every day for the last month or so. First, it was just me sharing lessons that I've learned in the journey of leading our community. But that got quite lonely and boring, I think, or at least I got bored of my own voice. So I've now since invited other coaches who also share our mission in supporting women live bigger and better lives. And of course, each of our coaches that we host, they're all approaching it in different ways. And I would say Jocelyn's pretty different. If you've seen any of the other amazing women who've been on this, I mean, Jocelyn is an activist. She's a healer. She's a spiritual life coach for, as she says, heart-centered women, which I'm going to throw it over to you to introduce the rest of yourself, Jocelyn, and maybe even starting with what does heart-centered women mean? But before I have you answer that, the topic that we're going to be focusing on today, or at least beginning the conversation with, is inner purpose, how to connect to our inner fire and how to grow it, I think, and just sort of seeing ourselves unconditionally as of that big life. Of course, there's tons and tons of layers to that. We only have about 30 minutes here. So fortunately, to also tell you all how to connect with her after. But thank you so much for being here, Jocelyn. And maybe you can begin by just telling us about what heart-centered women mean and how you got into doing the work that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the introduction to everyone watching. I'm Jocelyn. I am a spiritual life coach, but I also do a lot of things. My mission is really to help women get back in touch with who they are and their inner purpose and what lights them up. I like using heart centered women because I am very much drawn to women who desire to do good in the world, women who desire to really lead with passion, lead with the heart, lead with love, and create impact. So that's really what I'm alluding to there. Mission driven women, change makers, activists, creatives. It looks different on everyone. So that really is the population that I focus on, and I do astrology readings. I do private coaching. I teach a new moon manifestation circle, and I'm also a teacher. And I work with kids part time. So I really am living out that mission in so many different ways. And recently, I've just been having a little bit of an awakening on how I see my mission versus my business. And my business is one entity in which I live that out, but I also feel like I'm empowering women every day in
Mm.
all aspects of my life. And it's been a journey. I say I've been saying that I started my business in 2019, and I recently had a realization that I started the business in 2019, but I've really been working on everything my whole life. My
Yeah.
whole life, like everything that I've done so far has brought me to where I am right now. And, when I was in college, it was a health and wellness internship. When I was in grad school, it was getting my master's in public health. Then it was being a health educator on a college campus. And then started to become more focused into becoming a life coach more recently, like around when the pandemic started. And this is where I'm at now. And it's,
Fabulous. I
yeah.
think that's a very good distinction to make of just because you created an LLC in a certain year does not mean that that is the beginning of when you started to cultivate the path or started to do the work. Um, Now, with all the coaches I've had on, I ask them, what is the topic that you're most excited to discuss? What is resonating most with you? And really open-ended. And for you, you picked inner fire. So tell us how do you define that? And then how do we cultivate it?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone can define it on their own terms. For me, inner fire is like this passion that you have inside of you. Like if you've ever had a period or a chapter in your life where you're so lit up and
Mhm.
everything feels really good and really exciting and like you feel like you're in your spark. And it's funny, I used to say like I feel like my spark is like some like my spark is ignited. And I had no idea that was like spiritual at all. I just had times in my life when I worked with certain people that I felt like really turned on
Yeah.
and excited. And then the more I've unpacked this, the more I've realized that we all have this fire inside of us. And so many of us are not accessing that because we are just living based on a certain set of societal norms of like what we're supposed to be doing and who we're supposed to be and what is worthy and what is successful. And we're missing out on like all of this excitement and joy that is part of our natural design.
Yes. Yeah. For somebody who's feeling stuck, like maybe they've never had that. I mean, I know I've taught a program called Get Into Your Life where I said, think of times when you felt alive. And I assumed everybody would be able to at least find a time, even way back in childhood. And there were a number of folks who were like, I don't even know where to begin to start uncovering that spark for myself.
Mhm.
So maybe you could counsel, imagining I'm one of those people, how do I either dig into my past to find it and or create new conditions for myself where I can generate some kind of spark, and then we'll go from there.
Great. Awesome question. So, the first step is just opening up to it, opening up to the concept that you are unconditionally worthy of love, of a big life, of having fire and passion in your life.
Yeah.
And what the rational brain will do is it'll start to, how do I do that? Oh my God, what should I do? What step should I take? Like all the spirals, all the spinning. And so your first step is to just decide that you are willing to see your life through a new lens and have a new perspective. That's it. Just decide that you're willing to open up to something different. And I know it's like you want to see, you want more, right? You want more. And you need to be able to surrender and to allow your intuition to come through. And you'll receive inspired guidance. But the first step is really just believing that you get to have it and it's possible for girls like you.
Mhm.
And another step, the next step, we'll go step two,
Mhm.
is notice all the shit that comes up around why you can't have it.
Right.
Notice all of the negative beliefs and all the reasons that are that's not possible for people like me, maybe another time, maybe in another lifetime, or I was raised this way, or I'm not rich, or la 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 la.
Mm.
Just pay attention to all of the negative thoughts and beliefs. And one of my mentors, Amanda Francis, always says, be the gentle observer. And so just be the gentle observer of your thoughts and just get curious.
Okay, great. Next step, what would I, in getting connected and cultivating that, and maybe, let's say I'm somebody who's not feeling like I'm living the life that I want, I'm not in the job I want. Next
Yeah.
steps.
So it there is no specific one step. There is no one size fits all. There's no cookie cutter. You are going to be intuitively led. So
Mhm.
you need to pay attention to your intuition.
Mhm.
Take a deep breath. Decide that you are worthy. Notice the negative beliefs that come through, and then wait for inspired guidance. And you might be led to a podcast episode. Maybe it's this LinkedIn Live. Maybe
Right.
it's a book that falls off the shelf. Maybe it's a conversation with a friend, and you'll know because you'll feel it. It'll feel true in your heart. But again, there is no one size fits all. There's no cookie cutter path. We're so used to like, well, I do this. I go to high school and then I go to college and then I get a job and la la la. I buy a house in the suburbs. I get married, whatever. And it's you really have to come back to yourself and to this inner knowing that your body has all the answers. Everything that you need is inside of you. And so the more that we can really get in touch with ourselves and our desires, the things that light us up, where we find pleasure, the more guidance we're going to get.
No, a big piece of this is fear and self doubt. You talk about the fear spirals. When you're in the midst of one of those, do you have any tangible tips for what we could do to just remind ourselves that we can be the gentle observer?
Oh my gosh, yes. Lots of TikTok videos on this too. Um, Noticing I'm in my head right now.
Yeah.
All right, I am in my head right now. Like, we're not going anywhere. I'm in fear. I'm in anxiety. Like, this is not working. And take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Just notice that you're in fear. I like to say, God, angels, universe, whatever you believe in, help me see this differently. Help me see from another perspective. Um, I will try to get fresh air, open a window, go outside if it's nice out, breathe, get some water. Um, move your body if you can. If you can go for a walk, move your body, dance, shake it out. What else? I have different anchors, like things that I'll watch on YouTube that I know, like if I watch this one YouTube video, like it'll bring me back into more of like a joy present state. And
Mhm.
you have to know what works for you. But coming back to the breath is really, really helpful. Maybe like turning on a meditation. Again, it comes back to knowing yourself, knowing your body. But the biggest piece is recognizing that
Mhm.
you're in fear
Yeah.
and then just returning to love. Because when we're in fear, we're not getting anywhere. We think we have control, but when we're in our head, we don't have control. You have to come back into your body because your
Wow.
intuition, your wisdom, all of that's in the body.
Mhm.
And when we get intuitive hits, it comes from the energy of love. So
Mhm.
again, if we're in fear, we're not getting inspired guidance. So you have to find a way to return back to love, and how you get there is going to be specific to you, but those are some tools that I use and I found them to be really helpful.
Yeah. I'm gonna just add a couple of things off of this, and this is very specific to like my own journey, is start noticing ways in which that you disconnect from your body, because those are probably good indicators of how you deal with fear and anxiety. So, for example, for me, I'm constantly like looking at my phone, right? So if like an unpleasant feeling comes up, whether it's I'm bored or I'm doing work that's tedious or it's something that's a difficult, like a really difficult emotion, um, I don't get caught in the spiral because I immediately distract and numb, which is not doing what Jocelyn says. That's not returning to love. However, it is getting me out of the fear spiral,
Mhm.
but putting me into a different kind of spiral, into a numbing spiral. So if you want to kind of work backwards from, how to be more present in your life, how to connect more to your inner fire, don't just wait until the fear arises. Actually be proactive in identifying all throughout the day those times when you quote check out. And it's not to say that you shouldn't look at your phone or go watch Bravo or eat the snacks. Like, we all need to take breaks. These things, give us at least short-term pleasure for a reason, and pleasure and desire, that's good. But I think maybe what I'm saying is just understanding the place that it has, or the intention, being intentional in that choice, not going off of just, your mind immediately jumping there and therefore you follow. I don't know how you feel. I'm seeing Danielle Bali. She has a good suggestion as well. Yes, please. If anybody watching, please jump in. This is, as Jocelyn said, no one size fits all. It's also incredibly personal. But yeah, for you, Jocelyn, did that resonate? Or curious how you feel about when you have a kind of automatic orientation towards that kind of short-term pleasure, which oftentimes is manifested as a distraction and numbing. And if and when that is a quote good thing for you, or when
Yeah,
you might
actually,
want to make a different kind of decision.
I I would actually say to that is don't make yourself wrong when you go to numb and distract. We're so conditioned. Oh my God, I'm on my phone again. Like, why am I scrolling? Just allow yourself to have the awareness of, okay, I'm on my phone right now and I might be avoiding something. But
Mhm.
I've actually been taught to reframe as like, this is helping me. This
Mhm.
TikTok video is actually helping me because there's too much emotion here. There's too much charge here. There's a lot that's triggering me. So just bringing in like and allowing awareness and sense of compassion to
Yeah.
whatever you're going through, because all of that fear is there to protect you.
Mhm.
It's trying to protect you from some type of threat. It might be a real threat, it might not, but it is there to protect you. So the more compassion that we can bring in, the better.
Yeah. And I think when you start to orient or integrate more compassion into your life, it's going to be pretty shocking and disturbing when you realize how much of your life is spent in combat, not in compassion, both with yourself and with the outside world. Yeah, I think learning how to be compassionate for yourself just like allows the foundation for all the rest of the work to come.
Yeah.
If you have some suggestions for ways that we can cultivate more compassion for ourselves, I would love any practical tips you have for that.
Yeah, I think, oh my gosh, this is a good one. I think just noticing when you are not in compassion, when you're really fighting yourself, when
Mhm.
you're being really hard, your biggest critic, and just noticing that and reframing. And I mean, I have so much Virgo energy. I'm such a perfectionist. Like, this is something that I'm also actively learning and integrating. And I think just self compassion is remembering that you're human.
Right.
And the human experience is not easy. And we've come so far, and we have like big dreams and desires, and we might not be where we want to go, but we've come so much further, so far along from where we once started. And I think reminding ourselves that, and surrounding ourselves with people who are positive, and people who might be able to give you like a pep talk when you're having a bad day, all of that is self-compassion in itself.
I want to talk about trusting yourself, because that was, well, first of all, a word that, something that you had when you sent me what you wanted to focus on, but it's also the Latin root of the word confidence. And that's a big subject, obviously, in Ladies Get Paid, because it's the underlying ingredient for asking for a raise or asking for more in your life in general. You have to have the confidence for it. But if the Latin root of that is to trust yourself, where do you begin? I mean, you did mention intuition. I don't know if you want to start there with a little bit of a definition or digging into what that is. But what are some ways that we can learn to trust ourselves more, especially if we're maybe hearing a voice in our head that we, quote, think is ours? Do we
Mhm.
know if it is?
Right.
What should we listen to?
Right, right. We have been conditioned not to trust ourselves. We
All
have
of us or women in particular?
women in particular.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, like we have been taught not to trust ourselves, not to trust our intuition, and to look to external sources for validation. So whether it's other people, whether it's religious institutions, schooling, we have been taught to look for answers outside of ourselves. So trusting ourselves can be really scary,
Yeah.
especially when you're first starting out. You're like, oh my God, like, who am I to know this? Who am I to do that? And it's a muscle. It's a
Mhm.
muscle that you're going to build over time. And the more that you are in integrity with what you say you're going to do, and then you follow through, the more that you're building that muscle of self trust. And also, the more that you do this work, and you become more self aware, the more that you're going to get clear on the voice of your intuition. And to me, intuition is really just the voice of love.
Mhm.
Intuition is very loving. Fear is fear. It's fear does not have your best interest.
Mhm.
And but the more that you come back to yourself and your body, the more you're going to build that muscle around self trust. And then the more that you're going to be led to spaces that feel more supportive and more fulfilling,
Mhm.
which, to kind of wrap it all up, the more that you do that and the more you trust yourself, the more you're led to these fulfilling spaces, it's going to be easier to ignite that inner fire and that spark again.
Yeah. Yeah. What persistence is a word because I was just looking at what you had sent in, and that was a word that you also use, persistence. So why did you include that?
I don't even remember, but
Okay.
I'll say that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
It's a marathon. Moving towards your goals, your dreams, your visions, it's not an overnight success. And so it does require persistence. And there are days where like you are feeling off. And especially if you are a woman or a menstruator, like you are going to fluctuate throughout your cycle and
Yeah.
throughout the month. And I had a very real experience. We were supposed to go live yesterday,
Yeah.
and the night before, I was like so in my head, and I was, how am I going to get on this LinkedIn Live and talk about finding your spark when I feel awful? And then I woke up the next day and I had my period, and it was like the last day of the lunar cycle. So we were on a dark moon. And then I was like, oh, right. Like, I'm not supposed to be creating right now. I'm
Mhm,
supposed to be
mhm.
letting go and resting. And so it's remembering that we're cyclical and that this is not an overnight journey, and you have to keep showing up. And there are days when you're going to want to quit and you're going to forget about the mission. You're going to forget why you started.
Yeah.
And it's so important to be persistent and
Mhm.
consistent, and yeah, and not letting go the moment that things get hard.
Yeah, and really remembering that progress is not linear. It's easy to get really frustrated and disappointed when you feel like you've made so much progress. And it's funny, I'm using the word you've, but I should just say I. It's frustrating when, it's like I've made a ton of progress, I think, in reconfiguring my relationship to myself, to my work, to money. But then I'll have days or moments that I just feel completely undone. And then I'm like, well, did all of that, was I just like high on my own supply? Like, was that for real? Did I maybe not make progress? Though my therapist, and I'm doing internal family systems work, I have a new therapist who's great. She's always really excited to hear whenever I've had kind of a rocky emotional week. She's like, to her, she sees that as a signal of things working,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Because we're not meant to be happy all the time. Like, we're meant to feel a whole range of emotions. And that's something that, like, I've seen in the industry. There's a lot of like sales tactics and marketing on like, oh, if you're not like thriving 100% of the time, then like you're doing something wrong and you need to invest $50,000 in this coaching program. And I see this everywhere. And well, actually, we are cyclical beings. We're meant to feel, we're meant to experience grief, we're meant to experience anger and frustration. And the more that we are in touch with our emotions, the more that we can open up to a higher love.
Mm-hmm. I am going to just ask you to coach me for a quick second because I could use a little bit of help here. And I think you might have some good suggestions. So I'm curious if you also feel this way and if anybody listening does. I have identified a pretty specific life belief that I was raised with, that I have lived my life according to, that has a lot of wonderful qualities, but has some like negative consequences that I'm trying to undo. I want to find a more expansive definition of, I'll just say, life success. So the way that I have been raised is, in a sense, this kind of contract with the universe that I will contribute as best I can to the most of my abilities. I was also raised to believe that I was a very special person. And I accomplished huge things starting from a young age. I was a child actor. I won an award at the Supreme Court. I mean, it's like any kind of thing that I did, it was done to like the most of my ability to this sort of special strengths that I have. Well, gosh, that's a beautiful way of looking at life, right? Like, I'm here to contribute to the world.
Right.
Well, the negative or the downside is that there's extreme pressure, okay? Pressure to be
Right.
perfect, pressure to be productive.
Right.
I would love to find a either different or more expansive way of looking at the world, which perhaps I should say defining success maybe in a different way. Oh, I'm curious for you if A, that resonates, or B, if you've identified kind of like what your life universe contract is and how you can sort of push yourself to evolve it so that it doesn't trap you in the way that I have felt for the last 2 years. It's felt more constrictive than motivating.
Yeah. So when I started my business, I went on an unexpected spiritual awakening. I had not planned on that at
Okay.
all, but I found that being an entrepreneur forced me to believe in a higher power, and that experience has evolved over time. And how I see it now is you are worthy because you are. You are worthy, you are enough,
Mhm.
you are special, and because you are. Like, when you were
Right.
born, you are worthy, right? And so is everyone. And I think really dismantling the pedestal has
Mhm.
been like so helpful, in that you are not better than other people and other
Mhm.
people are not better than you. And I think, the more that we can really dismantle this pedestal and see each other as divine beings,
Mhm.
the easier it gets. And I read Big Magic,
Mhm.
Elizabeth Gilbert, and how she talks about ideas really helped me with this concept of like, we are all here to implement, to execute different ideas. And we're all like, if you, depending on like how what your spiritual beliefs are, I know everyone is a little bit different in this way, but like, you are a creation of God. And so we're here to like channel. We're here
Mhm.
to channel
Mhm.
different ideas, take these intuitive hits and like turn them into creations. And we do it in different ways. And for me, like, I am bringing that into existence as a healer, as a
Mhm.
coach, as a teacher. I love Broadway. Like, that's my thing. And so
Uh-huh.
watching a lot of actors and actresses, and like, oh, this is so interesting. Like, they are again taking these spiritual lessons and now portraying them through live theater, or you can see it on TV. And I think it's so important to remember that we are just channeling,
Mhm.
um, and we're all doing it in different ways. And there really is no pedestal. And then I think the other piece to remember is that it's all about coming back to love, returning to love. And the more that you can remind yourself that you are love, you're here to spread love, and that you're worthy, the easier it is to conceptualize. And one other thing that's coming to me, I recently just had this whole download on how I see worth. And
Mhm.
we have been taught to measure our worth in these very limited ways.
Yeah.
Like, we have been taught to measure our worth through our career, through our income, through
Yeah.
like our living environment, through our relationship status.
Yeah.
And the thing is that worth is so unconditional. And I had a teacher say it as every single time that you exhale, you are releasing carbon dioxide, which is giving life to, like, I forget how many it was, but like she had a certain amount of trees. There are a certain amount
Wow.
of trees that are living right now because you exhaled. And if
Wow.
we are circulating value in so many different ways, like every single time that you smile at somebody, you can completely change their energetic state. And then they go on and they do something nice for the next person. And you have no idea. Like, we are rippling out value and love every single day. And
Wow.
it's so infinite, but like, we were taught that you're only worthy if like you're making six figures or
Right.
7 figures, or you're a business owner, like all these things. And so the more that I think about it as like, I went to this event and like my students were so excited that I was there. And I was like, I made the world a better place today because I showed up for them and because I was there and they were excited to see me. And like, that's enough.
Wow. I have to find that quote now of how many trees that you're
Oh,
keeping alive, but that just inside me, there was a shift, right? Because again, I think, my contract with the universe, it's all about doing.
yeah.
And you're talking about being. And by the way, for anybody who's listening to me and going that you're such a hypocrite, I totally am, because I'm constantly reminding people we're human beings, not human doings, right? You can like know these things cognitively, but do you deeply feel them?
Right. Body.
It's certainly a practice. I mean, I think that is why you use the word persistence. You don't just learn these things, feel it's like you have to take consistent sort of like action to reintegrate that learning and see how it can manifest in different ways in your life. So that's a caveat to my own remark. A question that I have been asking everybody who's come on these lives is elements of becoming your own biggest champion in work, money, and life. So far, everybody who's answered has given a different answer, which is so interesting. So I'm curious, for you, when you're thinking about just kind of like the universal basics of being your best advocate, what are those? What does that look like and feel like?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I have to think. Benefits of being my own champion. What does that look like? I mean, I think trusting myself
Yeah.
is so big, of trusting myself, coming back to what do I believe to be true. And I mentioned earlier, I've just been on such a spiritual awakening and really undoing a lot of beliefs that I was fed, especially since the pandemic. There's been a
Mhm.
huge transformation for me, and I've had to look at a lot of trauma, a lot of childhood trauma, and look on what was projected onto me by my family versus what do I believe to be
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And then really staying true to myself and staying true to the person that I'm becoming, rather than where I once was, and rather than fitting into my comfort zone or like what would be easier, the environment that I once grew up in. And I think being a champion is really figuring out who you are,
Yeah.
taking the time to figure out who you are and saying, I'm going to forge a different path. I'm going to tell a new story because that is what feels true to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you realize in doing this work how it's generations of undoing. I mean, I read that here's a little anatomy fertility lesson, that you come from your grandmother's, like you were literally created in your grandmother's body, because apparently all the eggs we'll ever have, it's formulated in our bodies, in our wombs. So if we came from our mother's eggs and all of her eggs were formulated when she was in utero in her mother,
Yep.
we were therefore literally created from our grandmother. So even just from like a DNA perspective, how that gets passed on and the trauma or whatever historical stuff has been embedded into the DNA.
Mhm.
I have found it to be very liberating, because I don't just stop with myself and how I was raised. I really have dug now into how my mother was raised. I don't know much. I'm starting to learn more about how my grandmother was raised. She unfortunately recently passed, but I really just, I used to only look at myself and a little and how I was raised. I just, and for anybody who's struggling with like money stuff and their relationship with money, absolutely do this. I think this will have an even bigger impact on you. And don't just go through the matrilineal, line. That's obviously everybody. I'm curious if there are any, so just in kind of the final minute, besides telling folks where they can find you, follow you, pay you, any final words of wisdom that you would like to share with people?
Yes. I'm like, I could just keep going. But an anchor that came to me about a year ago was be here now.
Hmm.
Here now. I channeled this. And it was a reminder to come back to the present moment and really allow yourself to be where you are at right now.
Yeah.
We're not behind. You are
Mhm.
exactly where you're meant to be. And the more that we can allow ourselves to just be here, be in this moment, there's no suffering in the present. When we're suffering, it's because we're fixated on the past or we're worried about the future. But the more that you can really come back to yourself, the more that you can access love and your intuition and desire, and the more that you can start to manifest what it is that that next step is going to be. And this is like my anchor anytime I'm really struggling, is just, okay, let's just take a deep breath and be here now. And I think that's a good place to kind of wrap this up.
Love it. I think that's beautiful. Where can people find you, follow you, and most importantly, pay you?
Yes. So I am most active on Instagram. It's just my name at Jocelyn_Resnick. I also have a more recent TikTok account, which is just like short videos and tips on how to, get out of an anxiety spiral, how to ground, how to manifest. So those are my social medias. I also have a podcast. She Illuminates the World. Claire and I have an episode on there. So that's on Spotify. She Illuminates the World. And I do birth chart readings. I do astrology. I do private coaching. I teach a new moon manifestation masterclass. So all of that is on my website, which is www.jocelynresnick.com. If you just Google my name, I'm sure it will come up. And my DMs are open. Send me a message if this is resonating. I'd love to hear from you. Comment below. I love to hear like what's resonating, what's kind of lighting up. And if you have
Yeah.
questions, I am more than happy to answer, give you any input and guidance.
And thank you for your flexibility of yesterday, our technology falling through. And, but it was,
It
meant
happens.
to happen today. And I got to take a little break yesterday, which I think I needed. So thank you. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you to everybody. I appreciate Debbie and Danielle who wrote some comments, and much love to you. Have a wonderful weekend. Now go get paid.